When Alex stepped off the bus that summer, the air felt heavier than in the city. The little town seemed unchanged from the fragments of memory he carried from his childhood. The dusty main street, the faded storefronts, the silence that pressed close in the evening hours. Yet for him, everything was different. He was no longer the boy who had once run down these sidewalks with scraped knees and careless laughter. He was 18 now, uncertain of what awaited him, uncertain of himself. He came with the idea that the summer would be a pause, a break between school and whatever came next. But in truth, he arrived already restless, searching for something he couldn't name. That's when he saw Dylan again. At first, Alex almost didn't recognize him. Dylan had been his childhood friend, the boy who used to race him to the creek, who would throw stones until his palms were raw, who could disappear into the fields for hours. Back then, Dylan had been skinny, sunburned, always a step faster, always laughing too loud. Now he was older, and the difference was startling. Dylan carried himself with a kind of quiet confidence, shoulders squared, voice deeper, movement steadier, as though the town itself had shaped him into someone solid and sure. Alex felt it instantly, the shift in how they met again. There was warmth in Dylan's grin, the easy familiarity of a friend long lost, but never truly forgotten. But behind it, Alex caught something sharper, something that unsettled him. It wasn't simply recognition. It was as though Dylan was studying him, measuring the boy he once knew against the young man standing before him. Alex tried to smile back, but the weight of that gaze pressed on him more than he wanted to admit. Their days together began simply enough. Dylan pulled him into errands, small jobs around town, and chores that seemed endless. Fixing a broken fence post, carrying boxes, painting an old shed. They weren't glamorous tasks, but Dylan moved through them as if they mattered, as if each swing of a hammer or each lift of a board proved something about who he was. Alex tried to keep up, though he often stumbled, his city hands and used to the work. Dylan teased him relentlessly, not cruelly, but sharply enough to sting. Still soft, Dylan would say, smirking as Alex struggled with something as simple as tying down a tarp. Alex snapped back with clumsy comebacks, pretending not to mind, though inside he did. The more time they spent together, the harder it became to ignore the tension. Their jokes carried an edge, sharper than before. Their laughter always came with a silence afterward, stretched too thin, as if both were waiting for the other to say something neither dared. Alex found himself watching Dylan when he thought it was safe. The way he moved with unthinking certainty, the way his voice cut through quiet spaces, the way his confidence seemed effortless. Dylan noticed, sometimes, when their eyes met by accident, he didn't always look away. And that was when the ordinary moments began to feel dangerous. Sitting on the porch after a long day, the cicadas buzzing so loudly it felt like the air itself was trembling. Dylan leaned back in his chair, arms folded, eyes on the horizon. Alex sat beside him, legs restless, words caught in his throat. The closeness was casual in appearance, but inside Alex the pressure built like a storm. He didn't know why his chest tightened whenever Dylan shifted closer, or why the space between them felt charged, like the second before lightning splits the sky. Their shared history made everything more complicated. Alex remembered chasing fireflies with him as kids, remembered scraped elbows and secret hideouts, remembered laughter that came too easily. But now those same memories pressed against something unspoken, transforming familiarity into intrigue, safety into risk. Dylan wasn't just a friend from the past anymore. He was someone new, someone Alex couldn't categorize, someone whose presence unsettled him in ways he couldn't explain. It was in the smallest details that Alex felt the danger most. When Dylan passed him a tool, their hands almost brushed, and Alex's pulse quickened for no reason he could justify. When Dylan leaned too close to explain something, Alex found himself holding his breath. When Dylan joked, Alex couldn't always tell if the words were harmless or if they carried a hidden meaning only for him. It was maddening, this uncertainty, this dance that seemed to move faster every day. The town around them was quiet, but between the two of them, everything was loud. Every word, every glance, Every silence seemed to demand interpretation. Alex couldn't escape it, and he wasn't sure he wanted to, because beneath the unease, beneath the sharp edge of provocation, there was fascination. And fascination, Alex knew, was the first step towards something far more dangerous. The summer had only begun, yet already it felt like something irreversible had started. Alex told himself it was just friendship, just the old bond they once shared reawakening. But deep down he sensed the truth. This was different. This was closer. This was a line he wasn't sure either of them could cross safely. And as the days stretched ahead, filled with chores, laughter, and the constant hum of tension, he realized one thing with a clarity that made his heart race. Whatever this summer became, it would not leave him unchanged. The storm arrived without warning. One moment the sky was only dim, painted with the faint gold of late afternoon, and the next it turned a deep, bruised gray, heavy and alive. Thunder rolled in the distance like something approaching on iron wheels. Dylan and Alex had been out by the edge of the fields, finishing a job that already felt endless when the first drops fell sharp and cold against their skin. Within seconds the rain was crashing down, blurring the horizon, swallowing the air in a roar. Dylan grabbed Alex's arm, and without hesitation, they sprinted across the mud toward the old barn that sagged at the far end of the pasture. By the time they stumbled inside, both were soaked through, hair plastered to their foreheads, breaths coming fast. The rain hammered the tin roof above them, deafening, as if the world outside was breaking apart. The barn was dim, smelling of dust, hay, and old wood. For a long moment neither spoke, as if words couldn't compete with the storm. Dylan leaned against a post, shaking water from his hands. Alex stood opposite him, heart racing far faster than it should. It was Dylan who finally broke the silence. He lifted his eyes, steady, piercing, and asked in a low voice, almost hidden under the pounding rain, "Have you ever thought about it?" The question struck harder than the thunder. Alex froze. He couldn't pretend not to understand, not with the way Dylan's gaze locked directly onto his. His throat closed up, his pulse thudded painfully against his ribs. He tried to find an answer, but none came. The space between them felt charged, like a wire sparking in the dark, every breath feeding the fire of what was unspoken. Dylan didn't repeat himself, didn't push. He simply waited, as if the silence itself carried meaning. The storm outside raged on, and in its noise the moment stretched unbearably. Alex turned away, pretending to adjust his jacket, but the words hung there, refusing to fade. They left the barn later without speaking of it again, walking back to the house with mud on their boots and rain dripping from their clothes. But for Alex, the question echoed with every step. "Have you ever thought about it?" Days passed, yet the memory of that moment only grew sharper. Their chores continued, as always, mending, carrying, enduring the relentless summer heat. But everything felt altered, tilted. Each time Dylan glanced at him, Alex wondered if the question still lingered in his mind too. Every casual joke, every brush of an arm seemed laced with more than its surface meaning. Alex tried to dismiss it, but the thought gnawed at him, and the tension between them coiled tighter. It was at the bonfire that the silence broke again. Nights in the small town often ended this way, with neighbors gathering in the open field, logs piled high, flames licking into the dark. The air smelled of smoke and sweet corn, sparks drifting upward like scattered stars. Families sat in loose circles, laughter carrying over the crackle of wood. Alex sat apart from most, half hidden in the glow, while Dylan was across from him, surrounded by noise and easy conversation. Yet even through the crowd, Alex felt the weight of his gaze. When most of the others drifted away, only the embers remained, glowing red against the night. Dylan stepped closer, his voice quieter now, stripped of the bravado he wore so easily in front of others. He spoke of small things at first, the day's work, the coming week, but the words were only a frame for the silence beneath them. Then, as the fire dimmed lower, his tone shifted, carrying the same edge as in the barn. "You looked far away tonight," he said, not as a question, but as an accusation. Alex's chest tightened. He wanted to deny it, to brush it off with a laugh, but the truth pressed too heavily. He admitted nothing aloud, yet his silence was an answer. Dylan studied him, the flicker of the fire reflecting in his eyes, daring him to break. And though no one else was there to hear, the air around them felt crowded with judgment, the imagined weight of every neighbor, every family member, every expectation of who they were supposed to be. What had begun as an ordinary summer was no longer ordinary. The barn, the fire, the looks that lingered too long. They had already crossed into dangerous ground. Neither said the words outright, but both knew. Something greater than friendship had taken root, and with it came risk. The risk of being seen, the risk of being named, the risk of losing what little safety they had. And yet, in the quiet that followed, as the fire sank into ash and the night stretched endless above them, Alex understood that one question had changed everything. He could not forget it. He could not escape it. He could only carry it, knowing it would demand an answer sooner or later. The night of the party seemed harmless at first. The summer heat had softened into a warm dusk, and neighbors gathered in the yard with food, drinks, and the restless energy of people who had lived too long in each other's shadows. Lanterns swayed on hooks, casting pools of light across the grass, and laughter rose over the hum of cicadas. Alex moved carefully among the crowd, trying not to feel the constant pull of Dylan's presence. They were near each other, but never quite together, orbiting like two planets caught in the same gravity, yet careful not to collide. Clara arrived late, as she often did, her energy filling the space instantly. She was the kind of girl everyone noticed, her voice carrying easily, her smile practiced enough to disarm. She had known Dylan all her life, and her familiarity with him was obvious in every gesture. The way she leaned toward him, the way her hand brushed his arm when she laughed at something he said. Alex noticed each small touch like a needle pressed into his skin. The evening went on, noisy and bright, until Clara's eyes landed on Alex. Her smile widened, sharp beneath its sweetness. "You too," she said suddenly, loud enough for the people nearby to hear. "You're awfully close these days." The words hit the air like a spark in dry grass. Alex froze. Dylan stiffened at his side. Around them, conversation faltered, and for a heartbeat the group's attention flickered toward them, waiting. Clara's tone was teasing, playful, but her gaze lingered, too sharp to be harmless. Dylan reacted first. His laugh was quick, forced, almost brittle. "We're just friends," he said, his voice carrying over the circle. "That's all." The moment passed outwardly, the crowd's interest slipping away, conversation resuming as though nothing had happened. But for Alex, time had already splintered. The words echoed in his chest, louder than the music, louder than the chatter. "Just friends. That's all." He stood still, forcing his face into something neutral, though inside the ground felt like it had shifted beneath him. He wanted to look at Dylan, to see if there was regret in his eyes, but he couldn't bring himself to move. Because in that instant, what Dylan had denied wasn't just suspicion from Clara. He had denied him. The question in the barn, the silence by the fire, the tension that had carried through every glance, all of it erased with a single phrase, like it had never existed. Alex excused himself soon after, claiming he needed air. He slipped away from the glow of lanterns and voices, out into the darker edges of the field where the grass rose high and the cicadas screamed into the night. His hands shook as he pushed them into his pockets, trying to anchor himself against the anger and hurt twisting inside. It wasn't the denial itself that cut deepest. It was the ease of it, the way Dylan's words had sounded practiced, almost casual, as if protecting himself mattered more than protecting what lay between them. Dylan found him later, away from the crowd. His steps were slow, cautious, as though he already knew the damage had been done. He said nothing at first, only stood nearby, his shadow stretching long in the moonlight. Alex didn't look at him. Silence expanded between them, heavier than any storm. Finally Dylan spoke, his voice low, careful. Clara was joking. Alex turned then, his expression sharp. "You didn't have to answer." "I had to," Dylan said quickly. but his tone carried the weight of fear rather than certainty. If I hadn't, they'd keep asking. It would spread. You don't understand. No. Alex cut in, his words trembling. What I don't understand is how easily you said it. How easily you pretended. Dylan's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked away, then back, restless. I was protecting us. Alex shook his head, bitterness rising in his chest. Protecting us? Or protecting yourself? The accusation hung there, undeniable, and Dylan didn't answer. His silence was answer enough. The night carried on around them, laughter still drifting from the yard, music faint under the hum of insects. But for Alex and Dylan, the air was split wide open, full of tension and unspoken words. For the first time that summer, Alex wondered if what they had was real, or if it existed only in the spaces where no one else could see. The thought burned like betrayal, leaving him raw, unsteady. When Alex finally walked away, he didn't look back. He couldn't, because he knew if he did, he might forgive too quickly, and forgiveness now felt like surrender. Behind him, Dylan stayed rooted to the spot, caught between fear and longing, torn by a denial that had saved him in front of others, but cost him far more in private. The summer was far from over, but the fracture had opened. And once opened, it could not be unseen. The house was quiet that night, quieter than Alex had ever known it. The party had ended hours earlier, the laughter and chatter fading into the hum of crickets and the occasional bark of a dog in the distance. Inside, the air felt heavy, the walls holding onto the last echoes of voices. Alex sat alone in the attic room, his chest tight, his thoughts burning like coals he couldn't put out. The words still rang in his head, Dylan's quick denial, spoken so easily, like it meant nothing at all. Just friends. That's all. When the door creaked open, Alex didn't turn at first. He knew who it was. The steps were too familiar, careful, hesitant. Dylan slipped into the room and closed the door softly behind him, as if afraid of waking the house. For a long moment, he didn't move further, only stood in the dim light, his face shadowed, his hands clenched at his sides. Alex finally turned, his voice breaking the silence, sharper than he intended. Does this mean nothing to you? The question cut through the air like a blade. Dylan's eyes widened, as though he had been bracing for anger, but not for such directness. He rubbed the back of his neck, searching for words, but Alex pressed on, his voice low, unsteady. Because that's what it sounded like. That's what you made it sound like in front of everyone. Like I'm nothing. Like we're nothing. Dylan flinched at the accusation, his jaw tightening, his breath unsteady. You think this is easy for me? He asked, frustration threading through his tone. You think I don't want? He stopped himself, pacing once across the small room, the floor creaking under his boots. He looked trapped, a storm behind his eyes. It's not about wanting. It's about surviving. Alex stared at him, refusing to let the silence swallow them again. His voice dropped, quieter now, almost a whisper. Then forget everyone else. Forget what they say. Just tell me the truth here right now. What does this mean to you? For a moment, Dylan stood frozen, his chest rising and falling too fast, as though the words themselves might break him. Then, slowly, his defenses cracked. He looked at Alex with eyes unguarded for the first time that night, and his voice came out low, rough, trembling. I want you, more than anything else, and I don't care if it's wrong to them. To me, it's the only thing that feels right. The confession hung in the air, raw and dangerous. Alex felt the breath leave his chest, the weight of it pressing down on him until he could hardly stand still. He had wanted the truth, but hearing it spoken out loud made everything real in a way that silence never could. There was no taking it back now. They stood across from each other in the dim attic, the space between them charged, alive with something too strong to name. Neither moved, neither dared, as if stepping closer would unleash something neither of them could contain. Yet neither stepped away. The unspoken bond held them, tighter than fear, tighter than the walls around them. Dylan's voice broke the silence again, softer now, carrying a tremor that betrayed the weight of what he had just admitted. I don't want to hide from you. Not anymore. Outside the door, a floorboard creaked faintly. The reminder that the house was not empty, that discovery was always just one breath away. But in that moment, it didn't matter. The world beyond the attic walls seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them, suspended in the fragile safety of truth finally spoken. Alex lowered his eyes, not in defeat, but in recognition of the risk they were choosing. He understood what Dylan meant, that this was more than friendship now, that it had crossed into a place where neither of them could retreat. Even if they had to live in shadows, even if every step forward was weighed with danger, the choice had already been made. What began as a summer of familiar faces and old routines had become something else entirely. Their friendship had shifted, transformed, burned into something deeper, something that carried both promise and peril. And though the night outside stretched endlessly, one thing was certain. Neither of them would walk back from what had been spoken in silence. The end of summer crept in quietly, not with a sudden change, but with small, undeniable signs. The evenings grew cooler, the cicadas softer, their endless song fading into something tired. The light shifted too, less golden now, more fragile, as if the season itself was slipping away. For Alex, every day carried the weight of a countdown. His suitcase appeared in the corner of his room, half-packed, clothes folded neatly but without conviction, as if order could somehow mask the storm inside his chest. Dylan never spoke about the end. He laughed with his brother, carried on with chores, teased Alex as if nothing had changed. But in the rare moments when no one was watching, his eyes found Alex's, heavy with words unsaid. On the last morning, the air felt still, as though the farm itself was holding its breath. Alex climbed into the car, his father waiting behind the wheel, the gravel crunching under the tires as the engine came to life. Dylan carried his bag out, walking beside him in silence. At the car door, he held Alex's hand tightly, briefly, his voice rough when he said only, "Write to me." Then the car pulled away, the field shrinking in the mirror, and Alex pressed his forehead against the glass, afraid his voice would break if he tried to answer. Back in the city, life resumed, classes, crowded streets, the ceaseless hum of traffic. But the farm lived on inside him, in letters that came folded and worn, in late-night phone calls where Dylan's voice broke the distance for a few fleeting minutes. Each word carried both comfort and ache, proof that what had begun in shadows refused to die in silence. Weeks turned into months, autumn settling in, leaves burning orange and gold outside Alex's window. Yet his thoughts always returned to that summer, to the barn, the fire, the attic confession. The pull grew unbearable, until one October morning he decided. He told no one more than necessary. He packed lightly, boarded a bus, and rode out of the city. The countryside met him with air that smelled of smoke and harvest, sharp and familiar. The gravel road stretched ahead, and at its end stood the old fence, weathered and waiting. Dylan was there, leaning casually against the rail, his jacket collar turned up against the chill. When he saw Alex, his expression shifted instantly, a light breaking across his face that no letter could ever capture. He stepped forward quickly, not hesitating this time, and their hands met, firm, certain, refusing to let go. But they were not alone. From across the yard, a neighbor passed, her gaze catching the sight of them. It lingered, sharp, measuring, before turning away with a small shake of her head. The message was clear. The world outside these fields would always be ready to judge. Alex's chest tightened, the weight of reality pressing back in. Dylan's grip trembled slightly, but he didn't release. Then the porch door creaked open. Dylan's grandmother stepped out, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes flicked to their joined hands, pausing just long enough to make Alex's heart stop. She looked at them, really looked, and the silence stretched heavy. Alex braced himself for the words that might come. Rejection, scolding, or the familiar chorus of just friends. But none came. Instead, she sighed softly, not unkindly, and turned back into the house, leaving the door wide open behind her. The meaning was quiet but unmistakable. She would not speak against them. She would not force them to hide. In her silence, there was a strange kind of acceptance, a recognition that what they carried did not need to be explained. Alex exhaled, the breath shaking from him, and Dylan's hand tightened in his. They stood together at the fence, the fields golden around them, the sky pale and endless overhead. The world beyond the farm might never be ready, might always meet them with suspicion, whispers, or worse. But here, in this small, fragile place, there was space enough for their truth. And for the first time, Alex believed that was enough.